In other words, we don't have a perfect answer.
No,
It's more of a concept.
Because like what I'm thinking the content, because that doesn't really address the mentorship. The way you described doesn't really address the technology mentorship. It's more of an administrative.
Right.
It's more of a training than mentorship.
Right, but yeah, the concept could.
Mentorship? No. I mean, when you need to know something, what do you do? Oh, right. You asked me.
You know.
No, that is not usually what happens. We usually find out. We usually find out about 2 days before something is ready to already be done. We've done this. Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is that some of those informal connections are there, whether it's me calling up Ann and saying, well, listen to this. Listen to this. Can you believe it? Okay, I'm done. Yeah.
So how about if we do, go ahead, Donna.
I was just going to say, though, I definitely could see, I think Mary Kay is right, but I definitely could see a role for this group along those lines. I'm kind of short on details right now, but...
Well, I don't know if we really need the details as the idea that
Somehow capture the general
concept that we can expand this when we need to.
So how about, go ahead, James.
So, I've spoken, whatever.
Well, what I was going to say is that, when you're talking about the idea of vision, and obviously there is this piece that's in here, which we're trying to expand because it really needs to be strategic and technology planning, because that's really what this thing is. Does vision fit? Is that what you're thinking? Are you thinking some vision as far as, I was thinking something like, are we talking about strategic vision? Is that too narrow, or are you thinking wider?
Find that for me.
I don't know.
I mean, they're more different, I went to a conference. I saw this new thing. Should we look at the strategic plan again before we can do something, bring it up? I don't know.
Well, but keep in mind that this organization does not function in the way that most organizations do, where they write a plan and it's up on the shelf, and 4 years later you pull it off the shelf and go, duh. We truly do look at the plan, and we've expanded the role of who's looking at the plan. Sometimes we're looking at it weekly. And truly, we just met for 2 hours yesterday, and we have already accomplished a number of things that were tasks, and they were supposed to be done in the first quarter, and they are either completed or they are well underway.
Well, not completed in the first quarter.
They were supposed to be completed in the first year. We've gotten them done.
I'm nervous. I'm like, oh, wait.
So, we will be reporting on progress and soliciting input throughout the life of the plan. So, in the interest,
taking in new information and noting that, because it's produced so rapidly now.
Right.
And sometimes we're the producers.
Maybe it's a separate piece. I mean, maybe it's a separate statement. There's certainly, I think, a connection there, because obviously some of that could drive future planning.
the other thing to keep in mind is that even at the tactic level of the SELCO Cell Strategic and Technology Plan, the wording is not so prescriptive as to be, in year one, we are going to change half of the switches, a third of the switches. There is a task that we are going to upgrade the network, which means that we are going, what that upgrade might be in year one might be changing half the switches, but what we attempt to do in year two is going to be, could be very fluid, because the goal is that during the 2015 legislative session we will have additional regional library telecommunications access aid, which means we can do more. So the wording of the strategic and technology plan was left intentionally broad. So that it was not so prescriptive to say we have to buy switches. That we could come up with this idea that Mary Kay is saying, that when we come up with a good idea, so when Cheryl and her team want to explore outsourcing notices to both streamline the process, save money, and allow for greater customization at the local libraries, always a good thing, we can do so. But there's not a specific task that said we were going to. Well, that one actually I think was in there. I think it was that. So I'm going to, in the interest to move us along, Mr. Chair, I would like to say that we would suggest that we leave in assist with orientation and training. And since we don't train libraries, we train staff. Assist with orientation and training of online library staff. And then that can be a little bit left broad, so that this group could decide whether it's going to simply be a phone call between directors or whether or not we actually, you actually assist Tyler and Rachel in training staff. And then put participate, since we're not coming up with a better verb, in the strategic and technology planning, participate in strategic and technology planning and implementation. And move that one up, and I would move that one up.
So the positioning has a priority?
In our job descriptions, it has. And so since this is what I view as the job description of this committee, I would move this up to be the bullet that would follow after familiarize yourself with the ILS and other technology services, so that the charge still is, the name of your committee is still the ILS Operations Committee. While we certainly want additional input in the world of technology, the primary, what we spend $1 million on is the ILS. So that's where I would suggest putting it after familiarize. Yes? No?
Okay, I would entertain if someone would like to make the motion with these changes.
I actually have a question.
Oh, well, we can still do that after the, if remembering the fact that this is something we're going to look at every year, so the document isn't going to be perfect each year. It's going to be undergoing changes as we think about things and things happen. So.
Are you searching for a motion?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, I knew that. I just wanted to clarify.
Then I will, since no one is speaking against the motion, I will simply take this to the September Executive Committee.
Are we really saying we can't figure out our charge ourselves? Are we saying we don't like it?
Sure, what was your
No, I actually had a question. Our subcommittee is completely gone now. And that is what, like the Aqua Browser subcommittee, or or is that like BIP services?
BIP services, and there was an interlibrary loan, and there was initially a patron data. I mean, there were screens, and yeah, there was 7. Yeah, Cheryl's frowning. Yeah. there were like screens. There were patrons. There was a patron screen committee, and there was a staff. Yeah, we had lots and lots of committees, subcommittees. I would need a lot of things. And which does not say that this group could not at any point in time say, just as we have a room subcommittee right now, that we really need somebody to tackle this that are not the directors, that we really need, a different set of practitioners to do so. So if you need a resource, we can always create it.
I just want to comment that on some of these things, if we don't make decisions, it's going to go to the board and we're going to be making decisions. We'll just go, well, the group can't come to any consensus, so we have to do it if you're not going to recommend things to us. So
Do you want to
after a certain point.
Do you want to think about this more? Do you have anything else to add? No. Renita? Sherry?
I have my question, but Ann?
This is Ann.
Hi, Ann.
I because I can't see your faces or your body language at all, what's the feel in the room? Is everyone just, is there something I'm not getting? To me, that seems reasonable to go forward with these changes and then change it next year if it turns out there was something else we wish we would have said.
Would you like to make that motion?
Yes.
Did you say yes?
Yes, we have the motion.
Okay.
And a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passed. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next we'll go to our automation contract.
So the group needed more time to read the document. So I'm hoping that that has happened. We put together a summary of the changes to the contract, and then I have verbally gone through. I can certainly go through the contract again. John is looking askance and looking no. Okay. So the issue that seemed to me to be of the most controversy last time was the length of the contract. And so it ranged from it being an annual contract, which I certainly would not be comfortable taking that to the board, just because of trying to take the paperwork forward to 45 different governmental entities every year, some of which involve needing to go to city council because it's not a library board activity, or to school boards, seems to be
waste of resources.
Yeah. So it can stay as it is, truly year to year with an automatic renewal that we don't look at for another 12 years like we haven't for this one. So it seemed as if we had a suggestion last time of 6 years. I had drafted it with 5 years. So I don't know where you want to start the discussion. If you want to sort of hammer out the length of time, or if there are other issues within the contract language.
Do we have any issues besides the length at this time? We looked at this last time. So. If not, are we comfortable with 5 years?
This is Ann.
Yes.
I know that I was one person that talked about the length, and I appreciated the time to think about this, and then I also had some staff read through it, and I'm fine with it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody? Okay, do we have...
I have questions besides the length, actually. There was the question that came up last time about how Chatfield Band is being assessed, because their item records are like 10 times higher than...
And I forgot to check on it.
And my concern in that is, if there is a variation in how they're assessed, then that's a deviation from Writer C with the automation fee portion. So I just want to make sure we're all, you know what I'm saying, if we're making exceptions, and that's not really...
It's not correct contract language.
Yeah.
Yep, I will... Tyler, help me remember to do this.
Okay.
Okay, so that we'll get that corrected.
The other thing in regards to the automation fees, so in the long-range planning, there's also, I think one of your tasks with Amy is to look at a revision of the formula, potentially.
Correct.
If that occurs and we've signed on to a contract that specifies how or being assessed, then how would you amend the contract? How would that really work with the automation fee rider?
Our promise to all of the online libraries is that we will not change a automation formula without allowing each of the online libraries at least 1 full year of preparation, so at any budgetary preparation. So I envision first that a change in the funding formula might actually take the length of a new contract, assuming that we just don't set it out there like for 20 years. Amy and I need a chance to study it. This group would be actively involved in assessing any kind of change to the formula. That would also need to go to the SELS Advisory Committee and the SELCO Advisory Committee in a broader context, because while you certainly are here to help us represent the online libraries, it's a bigger context. And it would probably have to go to the Board Finance Committee. When we have changed the formula in the past, we have done so with a number of focus groups and individual meetings, and the date has been far enough out so we could decide at that point where we were in the life of the contract, and whether or not we needed a rider, or whether or not we needed, some type of amendment, or whether or not we needed just to wait till the timing of the contract. We do have language in the contract that does talk about the fact that the SELCO Board of Directors can set policy. So that could also supersede the fact that Rider C actually has the formula in it. That could also be speak to why we need Rider C out of the contract. So I feel better if it's in, but it doesn't have to be in the contract. We could put it in a contract, a different kind of contract that is not the agreement to participate.
That's not necessarily what I was advocating. I was just questioning how that process would.
I don't have an answer to it because we haven't started that part of the.
Or if you thought about the fact that that might change, but you specified a specific.
I hadn't even given it a thought. Thank you for putting that on my horizon, because we will no pun intended. We will definitely have to take, if it changes radically, we would have to take that into consideration.
The other, I don't know if you're looking for suggestions or comments or what exactly, but one thing that I guess I would like to see, and I don't know how feasible it is at this point because I'm assuming you want to move forward with this, but when we talk about the portion of the cost, there's never any specific sort of delineation of those portions. And you've mentioned in prior meetings that your sort of ideal split is 65-35, I believe. And I think that you said that that was decided by the board back in the early 80s. Well, to me, that's a very long time. And in some ways, I would like to have in writing what those splits are supposed to be. I don't know. I understand that. The difficulty in that is if you say, well, if your portion is going to be 65% spot on, there's always going to be some deviation from that. You're never going to hit that 65% exactly. But
actually, it was the other way around. SELCO was supposed to pay 35%, and the libraries were supposed to pay 65%.
I understand that.
Okay.
But,
it's not what we're doing.
30 years later, so.
Yeah. Although putting very specifics in can also say that if funding changes a little bit, there's no wiggle room, and suddenly we have to either really raise rates or cut services, or it's good to know, is it a set amount, or is that a attempted guideline to reach that? Because some people could say it has to be this, and that's just it.
I don't know that, James, that I would feel comfortable putting it in now, just to be very honest, because I don't know that we know that where the sweet spot is for 2015, 16, 17. what the board said when the system started, the amount of cost of when we needed $1 million to migrate, and I proposed a capital fee. I got shot down in the field. I never even went to the librarians. It got shot down in the finance committee. So the board, in as late as 2002, took on a greater amount of both operational and capital costs at that time. So while the theory may have been that it was supposed to be libraries paying most of the operation and SELCO underwriting a portion, that reality has been flipped for as long as I've been directed. So we're now talking 20 years. So I don't know that I have an exact number that I would feel comfortable putting in this contract, but maybe Amy and I can work on that.
Well, I mean, and I understand the difficulties of that and the amount and formulas and things constantly having to change it. It's just, you know, when I think about I'm signing on to a multi-year contract to participate in a technology piece like you do with enterprise. You have a set amount that you're paying, or at least some, or you're guaranteed so much. There's no, in some ways, there's no clear delineation of dollars in a multi-year contract here, and I sort of feel like it'd be nice if there was a better guideline towards that. Is that because just like any other contracts, you know, we want to know the financial impact, both short-term and long-term. So. I got one more thing?
No, that's good. I'm trying to think if there's a way.
I mean, you bring these, and I read through them, and I want to, you know.
What I'm trying to do is figure out if there is a way, because what we've been doing, and the board is on record, that when we first implemented this fee structure as it is today, the board put that no library would have more than a 20% cap, a 20% increase, and anything greater than 20% SELCO would absorb. And then as we moved into the late 2000s and there was financial crisis, one, we froze the automation fees, which maybe in hindsight was not a good thing to do. But we also then, the finance committee requested that we lower that if your fees do go up, when we finally did raise fees, they lowered it to 10%. So I'm trying to think if there is some way that we can come up with a language that is both more meaningful for the library, but not so restrictive to either the library or SELCO as to not be able to accommodate some unforeseen change, some new innovation. We have, and Charlie's example, or Charlie's worry about the fact that there's, you know, you put the formula in, it could be harmful. I mean, we have counties that meet and decide how they're going to distribute the county funds, and sometimes that distribution changes based on factors that the library directors agree to. We have had a contract with a county that had the numbers, the percentages that the libraries would get hardwired in the contract, and that ended up proving somewhat disadvantaged to some of the libraries in the end. So, you know, there are advantages to putting hard numbers in contracts because you protect the participants. It also can sometimes come back to bite you. So I was just trying to figure out how I might change the contract to address your issue, Jim. And then your last issue, or hopefully another issue, maybe the last.
This may be just more of a technical thing than anything. I wonder if the language adequately describes your role in cloud services, so things like enterprise, stuff that's hosted remotely. I know there's remote site equipment, but reading through, I don't remember if I saw anything that really talked more of the cloud-based environment in terms of your responsibilities.
Donovan, do you want to take a quick look at 4?
Yeah.
I don't think it does.
I'm just wondering if that's something you might want to...
Unless it was This is O. And that's probably even more vague than I want to live with.
Because you talk about arranging for security and things of central site equipment and some of these things, but now that we're moving to site ground and some of those other things, like I said, it's just a technical thing, but if you're looking for technicalities in the contract, then
we could certainly add a letter item under 4 that addresses that. I think that would be the way to handle that.
Okay. If you trust Donovan and I to come up with something that's appropriate.
So we don't necessarily need to act on this.
Well, it would certainly make me feel more comfortable that if this committee were to recommend moving forward, I'd like to take, the timeline for this was that it would go to the executive committee. We would review it with the users at the September user group meeting, and then we would spend September through December going out to library sites that needed to have, if anyone needed contracts explained.
Okay, so you want it signed by the first of the year.
I'd like it signed by the first of the year so that it sort of coincides with people's fiscal years, or calendar year rather, but not the, other than the school.
James, had you addressed Brad's comment? Brad had emailed saying he was not going to be here, and he had a concern about what happens at, say, a school that decides to cut the library budget. Is there a penalty for early withdrawal?
There is not.
Okay.
The early withdrawal penalty existed only in the first 2 years when we brought a library online because of the capital fee. So that there isn't. A library leaving is responsible for their costs. So if a library were to leave, whether it be a public library, which has happened, or a school or special library, both of which have happened, they are responsible for all their costs.
For the length of the contract?
No, for the cost to withdraw the item. Their items are owned by them, so we will do a data extract of their items if they request it. If they don't request an extract of their item data, a file, they are still responsible for the deletion of those records so they aren't in the database. Patrons are held jointly, so we would determine whether or not they were so unique to that institution as to delete them, or whether or not there was use of those patron cards by other institutions and leave them and go through our normal borrower purge process. But the site that's leaving is responsible for all costs that we incur, both SELCO costs and Cersei Dynex costs and admin costs to withdraw. There's a very distinct list that Donovan has and Amy has assigned calculated costs based on our time and motion study.
Okay, can we, with these concerns brought to our staff to address and clean up the language, recommend that it, or move that it go forward? I'm assuming once the changes are made, we'll see them. If we have concerns, we could get back to staff, because it's still, excuse me, going to the executive board and those things, so that we can keep the process moving.
So at this point, I will promise that I will add a reference about the cloud. I'm not sure I feel comfortable putting up promise in there about percentage of what SELCO will pay for and what SELCO expects from its library.
And the participation clause possibly modified slightly, or we're just going to leave that the first conversation?
The first conversation, I will go back with regards to make sure that the language is correct with regards to the jet sail brass band. And Okay, we still don't have a decision on the length of the contract.
When I asked about 5 years, I didn't hear any dissent about that. I have heard support. So I would say 5 years.
Considering how technology evolved and the libraries have changed in the last 5 years, 5 years maybe a little long, and maybe a 3-year thing would be where there's a little more vision, you know, like we can see better where things are going, or...
Bernita, the discussion we had last month about that was that actually when we looked at what got changed in this contract, it is about participating in the integrated library system, which is checking in and checking out books, and all the other things that it does. But that really did not change, so, which is why we have a 12-year-old contract right now.
Because under the 12-year-old, we still were able to make all these changes.
Right.
And be where we're at today without it being, if we had it more specified, it might have really slowed down the whole process.
If you take a look at the services that's provided by SELCO on page 4 and the services, the agreement responsibilities of the online library, I don't know that any of them inhibit us from doing things. So we say we're going to, you're going to input, maintain, and share bibliographic records. We have gone from MARC to RDA, and this contract did not prohibit us from doing stuff. So I think that it's broad enough, going back to that vagueness or broadness, that it allows us to still run the automation system. So I would, 3, I start thinking about 45 locations. That's a lot of locations to go out and visit every 3 years with a contract.
I think I'm okay with 5, and maybe I'll just say why I think it, in this particular case, you know, I think, Ann, you're going to be retiring within the next 3 years.
Yes.
And in some ways, I would hate to see a new executive director have to deal with a major contract like this. Maybe they will be wanting to move forward with an ILS migration, or maybe, you know, who knows? Well, I'm just saying, you know, and to have to tackle that right away. I think this might potentially give a new person some time to get their feet under them before they look at things like major contracts like this. So.
They should have their feet under them before they start getting grilled by these various groups why it's this way and they don't know yet, too, so along with that.